Now let's shift gears just a little bit and let's talk about security settings. There's a lot of enhancements to security in ASP.NET. I want to start off talking about basically two sections of this. In this video, this is kind of an introductory to some of the things we're headed into about security. We can make security settings or changes in the .config files. I'm going to show you those in just a minute. And we can also do it through IIS administration, through that tool that I opened up and kind of did you a little walkthrough on, wow, quite a few videos back. But there are a lot of security settings, and you have a lot of choices in ASP.NET, and you really owe it to yourself to dig into these things. And so again, this is just going to be an overview since this is an intro class, and I just want you to be aware of these things. Well, to start off with, let's go out to Visual Studio, and we'll go to our postback example that we were in a little while ago in some previous videos. And notice you still see our calendar control. Well, if I go to the Solution Explorer over here, you'll notice that I have a web config file for this page, for this application. And notice this web config file. If I scroll down, one of the sections that you see here is called Authentication. And I'm going to turn my toolbox off so we can see more data on the screen here. But notice this section sets the authentication policies of the web application. And notice it's showing you possible modes are Windows, Forms, Passport, and None. We're going to talk about a lot more detail on those later. But notice we can set our application mode right here, whether we want Windows, Forms, Passport, or None. Then notice down here, we can allow different users. And notice Microsoft's done a good job of annotating this so you can tell what's happening. The asterisk here will allow all users in. We can allow or deny users. We can just simply, notice, put a comma-separated list of users or a comma-separated list of roles here and take care of that. Notice here's our tracing and things that we were looking at a little earlier. So we can set things out here in this web config file. Now this would be for the web application. So we can do, XML-based configuration out here much, much easier than in previous versions of ASP. Now it's also possible, I'm going to close this and we'll go out and open the IIS tool. We're going to go to Programs, Administrative Tools, Internet Services Manager. And I want to point out some things about security out here for your web server. Notice my server is Leesburg LT. Now, if I expand the default website, these are all my individual websites. And so I'm going to take the postback example site that I was on. I'm going to right-click it, choose Properties from the flyout menu. And I want you to notice some of the things I can set. Now, we briefly looked at these a little earlier. But notice I can set read and write access at the web page, at the website level, the web application level right here. If I take away read and write, nobody's going to hit this web page regardless of their permissions. Notice log visits, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes, but notice we need to turn this on to be able to log it, and I'm going to show you how to log it in just a couple of seconds. But notice directory security. Now there's a couple of things here that are really important. We'll start at the top here. Anonymous access and authentication control. If I want to control access to this web page, there are a number of ways I can do it. And the first one is kind of strange, but notice this is anonymous access, and notice it's on by default. Now, by default, everybody is going to get access here. This means no username or password is required to access this resource. Now, IIS, or my Internet Information Server, runs as a service in Windows 2000, and I cannot get around Windows 2000 access. So the way I'm doing that, if you click on the Edit button here, you'll notice everybody who hits this web page, or this web application, I should say, this collection of web pages, and they come through with anonymous access, they're actually logging into Windows 2000 as this user right here. This was built for me when I installed IIS, which happened automatically when I installed Windows 2000. But this user, IUSR, Internet User, and it defaulted to the name of my machine. Now you can leave this or you can change it, but if you change it out in Active Directory, make sure you change it here. And notice we're allowing IIS to control the password here. But notice I could browse out and change this if I would like. But this is the user that's going to be able to gain access to our web pages. So what we want to do is watch this user. Don't put this user in NT groups or roles or anything that gives them access to things that you don't want them to have access over the web, or vice versa, however you want to do that. Also notice out here in the authentication methods, I can choose basic authentication, and notice it's going to warn me that if I use this, that it will give dialog boxes to my users, but whatever they type in there will be passed across the internet in clear text. And notice you can get some help and so forth, and we're going to say no here. Then there's a digest authentication for Windows domain servers. If I was part of an Active Directory domain and so forth, I could deal with this. We'll get to that a little bit later, and that's why it's grayed out now because my server's not part of that. Integrated Windows authentication, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And so anyway, these are my authentication methods.